guys, my name is Caitlin and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about all of the Russian classic literature I read last year and I'm going to be ranking them. I do want to start off by saying that even though I am ranking them, I think my lowest ranked book was still 4 stars, so none of these books are bad. I didn't dislike any of them, but I guess I'm ranking them on level of enjoyment and the amount they impacted my life. So I have 16 books here and I'm just gonna get started. So number 16 is The Eternal Husband and Other Stories by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I'm ranking this last because I genuinely don't remember some of the stories in here. We have A Nasty Anecdote, The Eternal Husband, Bobok, The Meek One, and The Dream of a Ridiculous Man. I remember liking A Nasty Anecdote and The Dream of a Ridiculous Man. A Nasty Anecdote is pretty satirical. It's funny, but kind of in a sad way. It follows this story of a man who's not invited to his coworker's wedding. And this man decides to crash the wedding, becomes a drunken mess. He just wants to make a good impression on his coworkers, and in this case, he's the superior to these coworkers. And it's just a funny story. It's very embarrassing, a lot of secondhand embarrassment for this man, but it was a pretty good story. The Dream of a Ridiculous Man, I really don't remember the storyline, but it is very classic Dostoevsky in terms of, I guess, motifs. Dostoevsky does write a lot of ridiculous characters who are tormented by something. There are a lot of dream sequences in his works, and I think it could be a good story to get into if you don't want to commit to a longer work like Crime and Punishment or The Brothers Karamazov or Demons. But the fact that I don't remember it, I don't know if I can fully recommend it. Do you know what I mean? I remember the majority of what I read, but when I look at this book, I just see like a blank hole. So sorry I can't be more help with telling you what this book is about, but maybe I need to reread it. I don't know why this is like a black hole in my mind, but I'm gonna stop talking about it now and move to book number 15, which is also a short story collection by Dostoevsky. And I do want to mention there is so much Dostoevsky in here. I do think 8 of these books are Dostoevsky just because I spent so much of my time reading him last year. But this book is A Bad Business. It's this cute little Pushkin edition. This edition has some stories that were in the previous one, which is A Bad Business. However, in this translation, it's called A Nasty Anecdote. It also has Bobok, Meek Creature, which in this book is the Meek One. And then it also has The Crocodile, The Heavenly Christmas Tree, and The Present Mary. Now, I got this specific edition for The Crocodile, and I loved it. I loved it so unbelievably much. I think about it often because it is so ridiculous. You could just tell Dostoevsky was having fun with this story. So it follows a man and another couple, and the husband in the couple gets swallowed up by a crocodile. And even though he's been eaten by the crocodile, he's whole in the crocodile's body and can still converse with people on the outside. He just sounds a little muffled, but he's okay. And obviously, this becomes a huge story in town. People are so confused and astonished and want to go see the man inside the crocodile. So the friend, whose name is Semyon Semyonovich, he's doing all that he can to help his friend who's stuck in the crocodile, to comfort his friend's wife, Elena, because her husband is stuck in a crocodile. And Semyon wants to get him out of the crocodile without harming him, without having, I guess, the crocodile digest him. And people have such rational approaches to this extraordinary event, and you're just sitting back and thinking, what is going on? But it is so hilarious, so funny. I think it's around 100 pages. And I think if you want to read a short story by Dostoevsky that's not soul crippling, like this is perfect. And out of everything I've read by Dostoevsky, this is probably his funniest work. The Heavenly Christmas Tree was really short and really sad. To be honest, I didn't care for it much. And The Peasant Mary was pretty good. Moving on, I have another Dostoevsky. I don't hate him, I swear. So number 14 is Notes from a Dead House. And I just did not connect with this story like I have with other Dostoevskys. At its core, this is a story about hope. And for that reason, I thought I was really going to connect to it and enjoy it. So Notes from a Dead House follows our narrator, Alexander Petrovich, who kind of takes on Dostoevsky's persona as the protagonist in the prison. As he meets the prisoners, finds out what they've done. You know, we get a closer look at who these people are, and even though they're in prison for doing horrible things, that's not the only side of them. We also see the brutal punishments that these prisoners face and the effects of prison on their psychological states. And I think one of the main points of this book is that people are not just one-dimensional. People are more than their mistakes. And I think at the time, you know, this came out in the late 19th century. I don't know how many prison accounts were published, and to have something like this published in Russia was probably a very big deal. So I think it has very high historical and a little bit of like political importance. I wouldn't not read this, and I kind of want to give it another try, but it just wasn't my favorite. Next we have number 13, which I definitely want to read again. I want to read a different translation. This is White Nights, also by Dostoevsky. So this depicts the tragic love story, which typically I love. What I didn't like about this is I felt the characters were just very childish in how they spoke to each other, how they treated each other. And I can see that coming from the girl Nastenka because she's a girl. But our male protagonist just, it just bothers me and I don't like it. And I understand that he's not socialized very well. He's very much a loner, definitely socially awkward. But it was making me cringe. Like I just couldn't get past it. But with that being said, there are some beautiful lines in here. I'll just read you a little bit. So in this edition, it's on page 15. I am a dreamer. I have so little real life that I look upon such moments as this now as so rare that I cannot help going over such moments again in my dreams. I shall be dreaming of you all night, a whole week, a whole year. I shall certainly come here tomorrow, just here to this place at the same hour, and I shall be happy remembering today. And it's just so beautiful and romantic and sweet. So I definitely want to reread this. Number 12, another Dostoevsky. I swear, soon we're moving on. This is The Double and the Gambler, two short stories by Dostoevsky. Definitely like The Double more than The Gambler. They're both like 4 stars for me. I like The Double because it's very Gogol inspired. It follows a man who believes he sees his doppelganger, and his doppelganger kind of just takes over his life and is doing it better than him, which is funny, sad, and like at the end of the story, you don't know if the doppelganger is actually real or just a figment of our protagonist's imagination. It kind of has some suspense in it because you don't know if it's real or if it's not, which I really enjoyed. The Gambler is fun too. It follows our protagonist, Alexei Ivanovich, and we kind of follow a few storylines. So Alexei Ivanovich is in love with this girl, and this girl's family is basically just waiting for their grandma to die because they want to inherit all of her money. But the grandma starts gambling. She's at the casino. She's losing everything, winning everything, placing bigger bets with Alexei Ivanovich. We kind of follow that storyline. We also have a tragic love affair between Alexei Ivanovich and the girl. And we just see how gambling addiction affects people. It's also important to point out that Dostoevsky himself struggled with a gambling addiction. So we're also seeing how he interprets gambling and how he could justify it. And even though he clearly knew by writing the story that you can win everything and lose it, he still continued to do so. Both really solid short stories, just didn't have that much of an impact on me. I would recommend The Double over The Gambler, just because I think it's so fun, and it's one of the first short stories that Dostoevsky wrote. Okay, next is our last Dostoevsky for a while. I promise, and it is The Idiot. Now, I just did not fall in love with this book like I wanted to, and I did like it. I really enjoyed it. It just hasn't left an impression on my life like some of his other novels. So we follow Prince Myshkin, and honestly, I love Prince Myshkin. I think he's a character you either love or hate. Actually, I think most of the characters in this book you either love or hate. I love Prince Myshkin. He's the one who's the idiot, and people think he's the idiot because he's sensitive to life, he's frank and says what he thinks. He doesn't always make, I guess, the smartest decisions, but it's because he'd rather be kind and help others than say no. And he's always willing to forgive other people. I really liked Myshkin. I do see why people call him naive, why people call him the idiot. I do understand it. But I think his character just shows a level of empathy and sympathy that I haven't seen in any other Dostoevsky character. We follow Prince Myshkin as he reintegrates back into Russia. He was sent away to Sweden. He was in a sanatorium. He was ill. He has fits. And he decided he wants to come back to Russia and reconnect with some family that he's never met. And we meet all these characters. He falls in love with Nastasia Filipovna, who I don't like, and like everyone loves her, and I know she's a misunderstood character, but I think she's just downright mean. I do not see the appeal of her. I do not see the appeal of Rogozin. They're just mean people, and I think honestly they deserve each other. I don't think Prince Myshkin had any business being involved in that love triangle. We also just follow so many characters who are horrible, horrible people. And we just have Prince Myshkin, who is this little, like, kind person. In actually all of Dostoevsky's bigger novels, there's always a plot, but it's very hard to talk about them because there is so much in here related to religion, philosophy, politics. Like, it's so hard to really go in depth on a Dostoevsky novel, in my opinion. I just did not really like the characters in this book. And I feel like that last scene was probably the most impactful in this whole story, but this is also like a 600-page book, and only the last scene really stood out to me. And like, I do have tabs throughout the book. There are some quotes in here I love. There are some moments in here that I love. But compared to these other 10 books, it's just not my favorite. Book number 10, First Love and Other Stories by Ivan Turgenev. Can we just talk about this Oxford World Classics edition? I love this cover so much. You can also tell I read this in the summer outside by like how yellow the pages are. In this collection, we have, of course, First Love. We have The Diary of a Superfluous Man, Moo Moo, Asya, King Lear of the Steppes, and The Song of Triumphant Love. Out of these stories, I definitely loved First Love, Moo Moo, which was just so heartbreaking, and I really enjoyed King Lear of the Steppes. All of these stories are so tragic and heartbreaking. This was my first experience with Turgenev, and just the way he writes, there are so many layers. Even though they're short stories, there's just so much emotion and feeling and heartbreak. If you want something that's just gonna tear you apart, this collection is for you. I think of First Love often. It's just so heartbreaking. I love stories about unrequited love. I love tragic love. And it just encompassed everything that I wanted. Okay, number 9, Yevgeny Onegin by Alexander Pushkin. This was my first Pushkin, and oh my gosh, his writing is so unique. It is so beautiful. This is actually a poem, and it's written in verse. We just follow Evgeny Onegin and this tragic love story between him and Tatiana. It's also about unrequited love, a lot of anguish, a lot of torment. Onegin is not a great person. He's very selfish. He's very egotistical. The ending is so heartbreaking because he doesn't end up with Tatiana. And as a reader, I'm kind of left wondering, well, did Tatiana make the right decision by marrying someone else, even though they aren't in love? Or should she have gone with Onegin, who is not the nicest guy, but who she really loved? And was it really even true love? And there's so many questions. And it's written so beautifully. I think everyone should read Pushkin. He's considered the father of Russian literature for a reason. He has inspired Dostoevsky and many of the other authors that I'm going to be talking about next. Number 8, we're going to be talking about my favorite author of all time. This is Dead Souls by Nikolai Gogol. I actually made a whole video about this book. I'll put it up here or up there. I'm not sure which side it goes on. This follows our, I don't know if I should call him a protagonist or an antagonist. It follows this man named Chichikov, and he arrives into this provincial Russian town. Chichikov goes to a bunch of different characters' homes and wants to buy their dead souls or their dead serfs. And we don't know why he wants to do this for pretty much the whole book. But a big part of this is meeting these characters. A lot of these characters are characterizations, stereotypes of typical Russian people. It is so funny. It is so great. I did give it 4 stars instead of 5 because Gogol did start writing the 2nd volume of Dead Souls. He wanted this to be a trilogy, and it's just, you can tell that the story is not all put together. There's a lot of chapters missing, and it's just not as good. I just like the first book of Dead Souls. I like what he wrote. I think he should have stopped it there, but he wanted to be like Dante, so what can you do? This is definitely a dense novel. I wouldn't start with this if you're new to Russian literature. I would like to reread it again because I did start reading this pretty early on in my Russian lit journey. Moving on to number 7. I actually just talked about this in my last video, which I'll put also up here or up there. And that is Heart of a Dog by Mikhail Bulgakov. And also we're in 5-star territory now. This was so fun. It's unlike anything I've ever read. This is actually a piece of 20th century Russian lit. The rest are 19th century. But this was so good. It's a little over 100 pages and it is just so different. We follow this dog named Sharik, and Sharik is, you know, just a mutt on the street. And this doctor named Philip Filipovich finds him, takes him into his home, and operates on Sharik and turns him into this kind of man dog. And since he has a heart of a dog, he causes so much havoc in town. At the end of the story, they turn him back into a dog. It's really fun. It's really different. It's also super short. So if you're looking for something a little weird, this is it. Number 6 is Plays by Anton Chekhov. In this edition, we have Ivanov, The Seagull, Uncle Vanya, Three Sisters, and The Cherry Orchard. Prior to reading this, I only read a few short stories by Chekhov, but his plays are so good. I really liked Ivanov. He's most known for The Seagull, which honestly I didn't love, so I kind of want to reread it and see if I have a different opinion. I also really liked The Three Sisters, but there's so much in all these plays. I kind of just want to read the back to just summarize it really shortly. But at a time when the Russian theater was dominated by melodramas and farces, Chekhov created a new sort of drama that laid bare the lives, loves, and yearnings of ordinary people. Ivanov depicts a man stifled by inactivity and lost idealism, and The Seagull contrasts a young man's selfish romanticism with the stoicism of a woman abandoned by her lover. With Uncle Vanya, his first fully mature play, Chekhov developed a unique dramatic world, neither tragedy nor comedy. In Three Sisters, the Prozorov sisters dream of going to Moscow to escape the monotony of provincial life. while as comedy, The Cherry Orchard portrays characters futilely clinging to the past. I also think this is a great place to start if you want to get into plays and don't want to go all the way back to Shakespeare. I think out of all the Russians, Chekhov just has this simplicity to his writing that makes him very accessible and easy to understand. I just think this is so great. I think about Ivanov often, and I can't wait to read more Chekhov. For number 5, we have The Government Inspector by Nikolai Gogol. This play was so fantastic, and I think it's a great place to start if you haven't read Gogol and want to get into him. You don't need any background knowledge on Russian lit, Russian politics, Russian history, religion, very accessible and easy to read. I feel like not all of Gogol's short stories or his novel, I don't feel like they're the easiest to read and comprehend. On the back, it says Vladimir Nabokov, who is a prolific 20th century Russian author. He's also written a ton of papers on Russian lit. He says this is the best Russian play ever written. It's actually so funny because it's this political satire, and when it was performed, it blew up in Russia. And it's ironic because a lot of it was making fun of Russian society when the people in Russian society were watching a play making fun of them. So it's just interesting to think about how it could have been perceived at that time. But even now you can see the satire in today's world, and it genuinely is funny. Book number 4. I love this book so much. I think about it most days, probably every day, and it is Demons by Dostoevsky. This book I love so much. It did take me a while to get into this book, but once you get into it, it's so addicting. This is a very big one. It's almost 700 pages. Again, there is so much in here. It's hard to talk about, but basically it describes the effects of extremism in politics. There is a lot about politics, a lot about Russian history in this book, also a lot about religion. This is the most challenging Dostoevsky I've read so far, but I honestly learned a lot, and I loved it. I loved it so much. Like, I wouldn't start with this as your first Dostoevsky, but it is amazing, and the characters stick with you. Stavrogin will stick with you. I also loved Kirillov. You'll continue to hate Verkovensky months after you've read this. There's so much in here, and it is so phenomenal. I don't even know what else to say about it besides go read it. Number 3 is The Collected Tales of Nikolai Gogol. This was my first Gogol, and I love this book. This book is split up into 2 parts. So we have Gogol's Ukrainian stories and Petersburg stories, and both parts are so good. Out of his Ukrainian tales, I love The Terrible Vengeance. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's spelled V-I-Y. So maybe Vi, not sure. Old World Landowners, so cute. It follows this old couple, adorable. The Petersburg Tales, my favorite in this whole collection is The Portrait. It's about greed and ghosts, and honestly, if you like The Picture of Dorian Gray, I highly recommend that one because there's a lot of similarities. We also have The Overcoat and the Nose, which are 2 of Gogol's most well-known stories. The Diary of a Madman is in here. We have the Nevsky Prospect, which was also great. You just feel like you're in Petersburg walking along the Nevsky Prospect with the characters. The Carriage, which was funny. And I think this collection really touches on the skill and the diversity that Gogol has in his writing. Is known to be funny and satirical, and it's a big part of why people love him. It's why I love him. But in all of these stories, we see so much more than that. He is great at characterizing people. He is great at creating the awkward misfit character and describing how that character feels. My favorite author. He will always be my favorite author. Whatever I want, whether it's a funny story, a sad story, happy, whatever I want or what I need in the moment, I can find in Gogol. Okay, number 2. This took over my life and made it so much better, and that is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. This is my first Tolstoy. This is the only Tolstoy I've read. I think this year will be a big Tolstoy year for me. I will be reading War and Peace, so if you want to watch me do that, hit the subscribe button. I will be posting a video on it when I read it. But this book is so life-changing. Follow 7 or 8 characters pretty in depth, and we follow all of their love story. Anna Karenina and her whole situation, that is not why I love this book. I love this book because of Levin. At the beginning of the book, wants to marry Kitty, and Kitty says no. Levin goes back to the countryside, and I really just love following his character, following his thoughts. And something I really got out of this book was eventually Kitty does marry Levin, and Levin thinks that him marrying Kitty will solve all of his problems, will make him happy. He thinks that it'll bring him some sort of salvation. And when he does marry Kitty, that doesn't happen. And we just follow his thoughts, and like at the end of the book, he does reach some sort of salvation through himself and through God, and it is just so good. Like, I know I'm not justifying it through words. You just get so attached to these characters, and you see so much of yourself in all of them, and it is just so phenomenal. I also want to say I thought this was going to be a very challenging read. I was very intimidated by Anna Karenina because it is so long, because it was written in the 1800s by a Russian author. This was one of the first Russian lit books that I read though, and it wasn't that challenging. I do want to say most of these books also have like a ton of notes in the back. So like if something is confusing, like there's usually a note and an explanation to go along with it. I think it's one of the best books of all time. It gets that classification a lot, and rightly so. So now for book number 1, this is my top ranked book out of Russian lit in 2023, and it was also my favorite book out of the 50 books I read in 2023, and that is Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. Now this book I actually do think of every single day. It changed my life. It's what started this whole Russian journey in the first place. This story follows Raskolnikov. He's our protagonist, antagonist, and he kills 2 people at the beginning of the book. And as the book progresses, we follow his mental breakdown as he deals with what he did. And it comes to light that Raskolnikov killed these 2 people because he wanted to prove that he was better than the general population. He believed there were 2 groups of people. The better group of people being someone like Napoleon, who he references, and a second group of people who I guess you could say are like NPCs. He wanted to kill these people to prove that he was like Napoleon, in that he could do what he wanted, that he could cross a line and he wouldn't feel the consequences, he wouldn't suffer from the consequences. And as we see in this book, that's not the case. Not only is he struggling to deal with committing murder, but it's also a story about realizing you're not who you wanted to be, or you're not who you thought you were, and having to deal with that identity crisis as well. And it really just takes you through every emotion, every scenario. Like, it is just phenomenal. This is a masterpiece. I can't wait to reread this book. I really do think about it every single day, and at this point I read it a full year ago. I think Raskolnikov is one of the realest characters ever written. He's one of my favorites. I also love Dunya, who's his sister. If you take anything away from this video, it's to read Crime and Punishment and then go read some Gogol, because Dostoevsky was heavily, heavily inspired by Gogol. He loved Gogol. He's like a Gogol fanboy. So at least I have something in common with Dostoevsky. But anyway, now I'm rambling. I've been filming for so long, I'm getting delirious. That is all of the Russian literature I read in 2023. I hope you enjoyed this video. I might do a video on all the Shakespeares I read last year, If you're interested in that, let me know. But that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.